let me just give a little bit of background, and then we're going to just go into a conversation. But particularly the day today was centered around race, relationship, reconciliation, and all the things that we're seeing. Certainly we've seen many things that are so challenging and difficult to see. We've seen the situation in our country, the killings, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and from there, then outrage. I'm not sure what. Oh, he just muted it in the house. And from there, just various responses, outrage, anger, apathy. We've seen riots taking place. Casey and I, we drove downtown on Thursday, praying for our city, praying for our nation, praying for people. And I hope that you're doing the same. And so this morning we're going to continue the conversation that we were having first service, centered around a couple of things. The first is this picture that we get from Joshua chapter 5, where Joshua is getting ready to go fight Jericho, lead the people in fighting Jericho. And there's these walls, these impenetrable, impassable, impossible walls. And he's looking upon Jericho and wondering, how am I going to, I don't know what he's wondering. I'm just, work with me here. He's wondering how he's going to battle this impossible city. And he sees the Lord there. And when he sees the Lord there, this is the question that he asks. Are you for us or are you for our adversaries? And the Lord says, no, nay, neither. I'm the Lord. And what Joshua then says to the Lord is, what does my Lord have to say to his servant? Well, the Lord gives Joshua this battle plan that doesn't make any kind of sense. They're going to go walk around the walls of Jericho 6 days, on the seventh day 7 times. And after that, they'll shout the victory. The walls will fall flat. We are in a situation where it seems like we're facing impossible walls. There's great hopelessness. There's great grief. But we know that we have a hope. And that hope is found in Christ. And as I said last week, we want to be reconciliators. But there's so much on that. There's so many depths to that. And we centered last service on this parable of the Great Samaritan, where this teacher of the law comes to Jesus and he says, teacher, what must I do? He says, what is the greatest commandment? Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he says, and who is my neighbor? And when he says, and who is my neighbor, Jesus gives this parable about the Samaritan who goes to one who's been beaten, been bloodied, been down, after the priest and the Levite pass on by. And he goes to that one. And it didn't matter what the backstory was. It didn't matter what yesterday looked like. It didn't matter how he got there or who got mad at him to beat him up or the story of all that. He just picked him up. And he put him on the donkey and he took him to the inn. And he put money on loan. My brothers and sisters, we have the opportunity right now to have compassion, to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so the first service was called Courageous Conversation, and this is too. And I just want to tell you what courage is, because there's going to be all kinds of through lines here. Courage, the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty, danger, or pain without fear. This conversation is difficult. This conversation has, I guess, danger associated with it, pain, but there's no fear, because there's no fear in God's love. And we're told to fear not. And so what we want to be in this community is a healing people. And Casey and I, we say it from time to time that we're brothers from the same mother. but you don't always know the stories there. And we played first service, a service, and we were going to play it again the second service. And in the middle, I just sensed the Lord saying, you and Casey go up there and speak. So I don't know where it's going to go or where it's going to lead, but we're just going to speak. And we're just going to talk from our hearts. We're going to talk about our history. We'll share some of our story with you. But I want to start here with Casey. I certainly speak for me, but I speak for our whole church. We love you so much. I love you so much. You're my only brother. And as I shared in first service, I prayed for a brother. And I think about how the Lord brought us together. We didn't grow up together. Why don't you share, I don't know. Why don't you share, tell us about your life.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask it this way.
Help me narrow that.
How did you get to where you are today? So before we go into some of the other things that we talked about, just talk about how you got here to Oregon.
Great.
And as much as you're willing to share personally
yeah.
on that circumstance.
That's totally, yeah. So I was born in a moment of, I think, real turmoil in our greater family. Samuel is my brother by blood. We have the same mom. And that's because, of the circumstance in which I came to be into the world. It wasn't really a right situation. And so I was born into the midst of, I think, was a family in chaos in a lot of ways, a lot of moving parts. I'm sorry, this is like boomy.
Fix it.
Cool. So I don't know if that's an EQ thing or if that's just maybe too loud in general. Check. Oh yeah, it's like way better. Okay. So born into the middle of, I think, some chaos, but it was a blessing to me that that as I got older and as I got more aware, I think things in the family seemed to stabilize in a lot of ways. I mean, there's still plenty of crazy stuff going on, but I was really sheltered, always felt loved, always felt received into that family. And so that was a blessing. I was grateful. And my dad, the man I call my dad, isn't Samuel's dad, and it's also not my biological. It's the man who married my mom when I was a year old, and he adopted me, and that's how I got Sanchez. He's Latino, and so that's kind of what I grew up under, was just in that household. And when I was 4, Samuel moved out. He moved out to live with his dad on this side of the world, in the West Coast, and we were back in the D.C. metro, and then we eventually moved down to Florida, which is where I pretty much was raised. And I just grew up going to church, learned to love Jesus at a young age, had a lot of friends, had a lot of, different interests, and tried a lot of different things, just like a normal, nice kid growing up in Vero Beach, Florida. And it was always really important to me to do right. It was just something that God had put in my heart, I think, and I'm grateful to him for that. So from a young age, I wanted to try and walk with him, and it was just a matter of figuring out what that was. And I think one thing that was an encourager in that was when you flew me out when I was younger. Now we're getting like a ringing. Sorry,
Get
mute the drums.
Get it one way or another. Yeah, just kind of mute everything else.
Yeah, so there's an so you flew me out, and we were able to like connect. You were always very intentional. I always felt like you were my brother, even if we were separated by a lot of distance. And so Samuel was always really intentional to help us be connected. And that was a huge blessing and influence in my life, because Samuel was a man of God. You know, that was something that was important to him and that he was walking out. And so it was definitely an encourager to me, even in a distant way, to keep walking that way. And it was even the best man in his wedding. Like, and I know that was just an act of love. I know he had friends that he was closer to, as far as like what they'd walked out together and like the experiences that they had shared in the recent history of his life. But he showed me that we were family, that there was no divide there, that you only saw me as your brother and that you love me that way. So that's, I think, a large part of what opened a door for me to come out here to Oregon. I'd grown up wanting to do theater. I was going to go do the Broadway thing. I was excited about that. But as I was in college studying it, I fell out of love with it. And I just recognized that for the work and effort and pouring out that I would need to be successful in that field, I didn't feel like it was worth it. I didn't feel like it was gratifying enough. And so I was lost. I was adrift. I didn't know what I was doing. And that was hard. That was a weird, challenging season. But in the midst of it, came out here with my family to visit Samuel one Christmas. I met Rich Jones at Calvary Chapel Worship Center. And, they just kind of jokingly threw out the idea, why don't you come intern with us this summer? Because Samuel was about to plant this church as a campus at the time. And honestly, I was so aimless at that point, and the only thing I really did know was that I loved God and my brother loved me, and like those things added up well in that circumstance. And so I just tried coming out for the summer, seeing what that looked like, and I fell in love with the students. I fell in love with what ministry was, and I felt like there was a calling there. And so in spite of the fact, and I think many of you have heard this, like there were a lot of obstacles to me coming out here, with my education, financially, locationally, relationally. But God really made a clear path. And since then, since I moved out, and God just made that happen so pointedly and so purposefully, I've been able to grow in ministry, met my wife soon after I moved here, got my daughter Jamie, and just been growing as a person, walking alongside and under the leadership of my brother. And that's kind of a line of my story. And that's probably a lot of the way I would tell my story under most circumstances. You know what I mean? Like if someone asked me my life story, those are probably the points that I would hit. And there's so many different variations and things that have happened in my life that have shaped me. And, depending on the conversation, some of those things might get highlighted along the way. But then there are some that I almost never bring up. And I think that's some of where we're probably going to go today.
Yeah. And I know that this is vulnerable, it's courageous. And part of that vulnerability, and I think the power in that, is that despite all the obstacles, despite differences, despite, whatever, the Lord knitted us together. And I shared first service about how when, and let me just say this to you, the church. The Bible says to honor your mother and your father. And in any time that I share anything, that's what I want to endeavor to do. God has brought so much healing in and over our family, and he's graced us in so many magnificent and powerful ways. But the stories that we share are very vulnerable, and it's courageous, but we're going to do that without fear, because Casey is my only brother, yet when we introduce ourselves to people, that's often met with
oh, that's cute, like brother in Christ, you know.
Yeah, people have said that. Yeah, brothers in Christ, aren't we all?
Or, oh yeah, he's from Florida. That's why he's.
That's why he has a tan. That's what someone said once.
That's a
or
fun one.
or the most common one, and this isn't to make you feel bad if you're one of the ones who've said that.
We still love you. We understand. We get it. It can be surprising.
One of the most common ones is, yeah, I see the resemblance. And I've never felt that. Not from the moment I found out you were going to be brought to this, you were going to come on this earth, or the moment that you were born. Like, I've always loved you. That was something that I think the Lord prepared my heart for.
Mm.
Yet, I know, like, under the context of today, when you leave here and I leave here, people look at us completely different. And I've just been so struck over the last couple of days about how the Lord has people, children of God. And he talks about, like we talked about last week, like Colossians 3, right? Like, Christ is all, Christ is in all. And there's this reality eternally where we're not going to make it about all of these little divisions or all of these little things. And I'm just, like, since our conversation Friday, I've been thinking about how, like, all of these walls, all of these things that tear people apart, like, really, it's only skin deep.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to stand before the Lord. And people make it about skin color. And I just sense the Lord is so grieved by that. Now, I'm not trying to say that that's not a real thing in our world, but I think that what the Lord has given you and I to model is that we just love each other. But in that, I see these things going on in our world, and I'm so grieved, to see the way that people treat people of a different color. And to think that my brother, who I loved before I even knew, would experience hate because of your skin color.
Mm-hmm.
And you grew up, right? Like, we had the same mom, same favorite meals when we go home, right? We asked for the same things, like, but you grew up, and I want to talk about, and I think that's I think that's helpful and healing, but for us to just have an open conversation about what that was like for you, and we'll just work our way toward wherever the Lord leads.
Amen. Yeah, so I think then it sounds like it's time for me to just share some of the things that get glossed over when I tell my story a lot of the time. And I want you to know, those who are listening, that I've had so many interesting conversations in the past week with my white friends, frankly, who have reached out and wanted to understand and listen and ask questions. And I've been invited to share parts of my life that I very rarely felt that I could or felt comfortable sharing, because I either thought that I would be dismissed or misconstrued as like an angry black man, or that I had a victim mentality. I'm not somebody that seeks a lot of sympathy, and or that I would somehow attack their worldview or make them uncomfortable, or challenge them when they weren't looking to be challenged. And then that's difficult in particular because the kind of stuff, that I'm talking about here is deeply woven into my experience, and it ends up resting very near to my heart. And it's a very complex tapestry of experiences and feelings and responses and comments and things that I've just internalized or tried not to. And so it's been genuinely scary to talk about race for a lot of my life. There are a lot of conversations where that's begun, and I immediately start to feel a knot building in my stomach. And I know that's not an uncommon experience to anybody of any race. I'm sure many people, for different reasons, might have felt nervous about the subject. It can be really sensitive. But in my conversations with my friends, I've found how beneficial it's been to share some of the things that I have seen, just because they were unique and they were different than things that they had walked through. And it caused me to realize that in so many ways, the reality that I was engaging with looked so different from theirs. And I think it helped them. I know it helped them see that too. But again, it was even a surprise to me. I didn't realize how few people knew or imagined. So with that said, let me share. I'll probably look at Samuel a lot because it's my brother. There's comfort there. I'll start young. I remember the first time I realized that my skin was a different color and that meant something. Not that it was the first time I ever heard anything about race or racism or whatever. Like the rest of us, we grow up in a culture that's saturated by a lot of racial ideas and feelings. And, I grew up in a time where there was, just as there is now, different racial tensions. And I knew that. My mom never hid my ethnicity from me. It was nothing like that. But it was once I had lived enough life and seen enough things and understood that some people might see me a different way, that one day I was a kid. I was walking by a mirror in the bathroom and I saw myself and I thought, oh, I'm a black person. I knew very well what the idea around a black person was, but it sunk into my heart for the first time. Oh, wait, I'm that. Interesting. That wasn't a negative thing. There was nothing, there was no grief in my heart over that. There was no anything. It was just an innocent realization, okay. And then I continued to grow, and I didn't put much mind to that fact. That wasn't an important part of my identity to me. It was just the color of my skin, right? But as little as I was inclined to think about it, I was reminded of it constantly by my peers growing up. And it seemed more and more the older I got. People got more, aware or bold or whatever. But I wrestled with being confronted with my race so much in my life. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, right? There's nothing wrong with being black. And a lot of the times when my peers were pointing out my race, they were doing it pretty innocently. It'd be something like, oh, hey, you're black. You're probably really good at basketball. Come be on our team.
Can I share a story about that?
Sure.
The first time that I played basketball with Casey, I think you were in middle school.
Something like that.
And I was really into basketball. You know this if you go to church here. I was really into basketball. And so we went out and we're shooting around the park. And I'm trying to teach him how to do some things. And these two guys come over and they go, hey, do you guys want to play us, 2-on-2 basketball? And I was like, yeah, let's do this. And so we were going out and I was passing it down to Casey and he was trying to go shoot it, but they kept blocking his shot. And so I said, Casey, you got a pump fake. So a pump fake is you have the ball and you fake it up. You fake it up and then they jump and then you're able to shoot. And he was down there and he kept doing it. And so I brought him over. I said, Casey, you got a pump fake so that they will jump and then you can shoot it. And then we went down again and he would not do it. And I'm going, Casey, I pulled him aside. I go, Casey, what are you doing? You got a pump fake. And he goes, Samuel, He goes, Samuel, I totally would, but honestly, it just seems very deceptive to me, and I don't want to deceive anybody. And I'm like, all right, I'll just start taking all the shots. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So that's about as good as basketball as I was. So people would ask me to be on their team, and then I wasn't good at it, and they'd be like, "Okay, I guess we got a defective one, right?" Like, and so stuff like that, that only hurts when all of a sudden you're letting them down. But that stuff is whatever. It gets weird when people in school start saying racial slurs towards you that you wouldn't have really expected. Or you're just scrolling through the comments of a YouTube page and you start reading about how somebody thinks that African Americans are fundamentally less intelligent than other races, and here are the statistics why, and they're criminals, and and that stuff's like distant, right? So it's just who that opinion hurts. I actually remember many times when I was brokenhearted over coming across those opinions because I didn't know people still felt that sentiment. But then, like I said, as I grew, more and more of these experiences started to accumulate. Like people who I had no interest in dating telling me that they wouldn't date me because of my race. I was like, thank you for volunteering that information. Or I guess I'm just trying to be wise in how and what I share. But I know this is an open-hearted conversation, and so I want to do that. So there are a lot of things in my life that were maybe presumed to be innocent, and I'm not the kind of person that like tries to carry a big chip on my shoulder. I don't, I'm not walking in anger. I know my identity goes beyond. But I even think about, maybe a more overt instance when I was in college, and I was part of a show. And I'd been cast in this benefit show. So we were doing a musical to raise money for this cause. And the director was this older white man. And we were all put in the show. And the way it worked was you were cast, and then you would audition for like specific scenes. And the musical was all about like love and romance, dating and marriage. And as we went through this process of reading for parts, I noticed that I was being asked to read a lot fewer parts than my peers. And, I was able to mark and recognize my talent is pretty equivalent with these people. I wonder why I'm not even being asked to try for the part. And so after a few of these where I was overlooked, I asked the director, hey, you had me sing for that back there. Do you want me to try that again? Or do you want me to sing or read for any of these other parts? I was just making sure that if that's something you wanted, I could be prepared for it. And then he let me know, very straightforward at least, Casey, I don't think that you in some of these more intimate relationship scenes will reflect very well with our donors. That would be an interracial couple, like a black man and a white woman. I just don't think that they would be comfortable with that. So I'm just not going to have you read for those parts. You can read for these, and that'll be fine. And
so how did you respond to that?
I was surprised that he would say that, because I never want to. I don't go around assuming anybody is racist. I still don't even necessarily assume that person was racist, but he had this idea in his head that there would be a problem there, and so my response was just, all right. Well, thank you for letting me know. I tried to give him respect. I didn't get angry. I didn't blow up at him. I didn't even complain. I just took what he said and went away. And what's interesting is I was actually just reflecting on this recently. I told all my friends in the cast about it, who were all white except for me, and they all thought it was horrible. They were all like, that's ridiculous. I can't believe he would say that. But not a single one of us said anything to him. It just didn't seem appropriate. It felt like, this was the director, and we couldn't cross that line. And so we just went about our business. I had fun with my friends, singing the songs that they would let me sing, and went on my way. And so that was pretty overt, just that he had this idea in his head and believed that these people would carry a sentiment like that, and was willing to exclude me intentionally because of it. And that's not an isolated incident. I'm not here to list the catalog of things that I've been through, but I do want to share some that I think are impactful. One just interesting fact of my life that I've shared with a few people that I've had these conversations with that seems to communicate something is when I first moved to Beaverton, I got pulled over 18 times within the first year of living here. And I can't necessarily say that I know why I was pulled over, except for what they told me. I'll tell you that I wasn't doing illegal things. I think the worst thing that I did was turn to the far lane when I was turning left, when there was no one on the road. But obviously that was a mistake. I honestly didn't realize what I was doing. But the police officer pulled me over and let me know, right, and talked to me. But the line normally went, well, what are you up to? What are you doing tonight, son? How are things going? Like, where are you coming from? Where are you going? What's going on? And I don't know that any one of those cops was racist. I didn't even necessarily carry that feeling in the moment. Like, I never want to make assumptions about somebody's heart. And I honestly didn't even know how unusual that experience was until I talked to some of my white friends about it, and they told me that was very, very strange. So I thought maybe Beaverton cops are just very intense. I think they can be.
Well, I want to say that, and I think that this is important for people who are watching to understand that I've known you your whole life, and I didn't hear about any one of those things that you just shared until 3 days ago. And I don't think that anyone, certainly me, but anyone who would, accuse you of like making something up, or like, you don't live that way, you don't carry yourself that way. And I know that in our day, there are extremes. There are people who are looking, for things or looking for offenses and things of that sort. But I just want to put you at ease. Like, and that's not saying of any particular race. That's just there are people who are always looking for something to be offended by. But you walk with just this great level of sobriety and forgiveness, but you have a story. And and some people are mean,
There's something I really need to speak to that, and I'll share that. But I want to finish some of this, just some maybe more specific things that were strange, like, drop at the time when these things happened. I was dating my now wife, then girlfriend Michaela, and she was with me for a good number of those, and I remember dropping her off at her house, and the cops being out. Like, she lived at a parsonage on Beaverton Foursquare, and so we pulled in, and we were inside the kitchen talking with her and her friends, and then one of her friends looks out the window and says, "Casey, there are police searching your car, shining flashlights." And so I, of course, went out to ask them, "Officers, what's going on? Do you need something?" And they said, "Yeah, we saw you pull in and just wanted to see what was going on." Or one thing that my wife shared with me that I didn't even register at the time, whether that's because I just didn't hear it, or I didn't recognize it, or they said it in a different way, or whatever. But she remembered this, even though I hadn't, that we were pulled over, and the officer asked her if she felt safe, asked her if she was there against her will. And honestly, I'm grateful that I didn't register that, because I think if I'd noticed that was being said or asked, I would have been deeply wounded and offended. And that's not something I needed in that moment. But that was even a burden on her. She was so surprised at these encounters we were having. She'd never been asked anything like that. Man, my wife, has, I guess, being married to a person of color, has had her own catalog of experiences that some of them I didn't even know from her until some of these conversations came out. Like, people, I know it's meant to be innocent, but asking the question, wow, Jamie, our daughter, she has blue eyes. Are you sure that Casey's the father? Like, I know that's a joke, but like, to say that to my wife, to say that to a woman, what's being implied isn't respectful. And the thing of it all is I really don't try and walk in assumptions. I think so much of this conversation surrounds people not understanding or just certain assumptions that they might carry. And I think we'll maybe talk a little bit more about, I don't know, I won't assume. We'll get there if we get there. But one thing I did want to address that I'm really grateful to you for pausing and maybe just releasing me from having to defend my heart in this. This has been a really crazy week and a half, I think, for our country and for a lot of people. And it's been heavy, and I've had a lot of conversations, but not in any one of them did I cry until yesterday when I was driving and I was listening to just this guy who talks about guitar pedals most of the time, but he decided that he was going to address this specific issue. He's a white man. I like him. I like the way he talks about guitar stuff, and so I was curious what he would say. And he was just talking about the situation and talking about things that he couldn't understand because he hadn't experienced them, but he was trying to empathize, and it was very kind the way he was approaching it. But he started to say, yeah, there are things that I'll never really know, like explaining to my kids why there's certain areas of town that they can't go to, even if they're typically safe, and things like that. But one thing he said, well, he said this: I don't have to worry about being a credit to my race. And for some reason, that is the one that broke me wide open. And I was just driving and sobbing, and I know it might seem silly or small, but I can't tell you how many times I've had the thought, oh, I don't want to look stupid in front of this person because then it's going to reinforce the stereotype that black people are stupid. I can't be too loud in the situation because then they're going to think that all black people are this way. And I know that's not giving people credit for what they may or may not think or how they may or may not judge. And so I always try and dismiss that thought quickly because it can't be my burden, but I can't tell you how often I've, for some reason, shouldered that and just taken on this weight that I needed to be a representative of all that we could be as a race. And that's so stupid.
Yeah, but I think, Casey, that it's real. And I was thinking about this, and I think that this is important for people who are seeking to try and understand, because there's a lot of misunderstanding. People don't understand why there are people walking around with shirts that say Black Lives Matters. People don't understand why this term white privilege is coming out. And I'm talking about people who look like me. If some white person goes out and does something stupid, I don't feel that's attached to me in any way, shape, or form. I'm just like, well, that's some crazy person. But it's almost like because it's not almost like, and you speak to this, it's like there's for me, I have like this individualization, like my actions are my actions, and people look at me based upon my actions and the things that I do. For you, it's almost like you're representing an entire race of people, and if you blow it or they blow it, there's this sense of being attached to that, because when you walk into a room and you're a minority, people identify you with what they see on the news or what they, know of that. And you spoke a little bit to that, like even just in like athletics or this, that, or the other, which by the way, you're a pretty fast runner. I was trying to get him a scholarship at PSU. That was supposed to be my hook to get him out here, but that is real. And so then let's go down the line here of feeling that way, but then seeing a man who dies on the side of a pavement because there's a police officer's knee on his neck for 9.5 minutes. By the way, if you put your knee on anyone's neck for 9.5 minutes, you're going to die. And I would gather. And there's a feeling, or I guess maybe not, don't let me ask questions, not say, but is there a feeling in the same way that like you see something happen and that grieves you in a deeper way because there is this level of sort of tetheredness? And I'm not even saying that you are that, or, like you don't have some sordid past or anything like this, but, like Pastor Richard said in the thing, he goes, I couldn't help but think that could be me.
Yeah. I really, really fight, I think, and maybe I'm inclined this way, but it's really important to me to try and view everything as case by case, individual by individual as I can. And I know that I do that because that's important to me, because in the times that it hasn't been afforded to me, it's painful. And I have been reminded, like I said earlier, like I am not, others have been so much more interested in my race than I ever have been. I've been constantly reminded of that in my life, even if it wasn't something I was inclined to ponder or recognize. And so that, I think, is part of where that mentality of like tethering myself comes from. It's been very externally put on me by just my circumstances and my experiences, by people around me, that it's evident to me that so many people out there do categorize me that way. I mean, the fact of the matter is, biologically, I am as white as I am black. My mom is white, and my biological father was a black man. And so in like the reality of biology, for whatever that's worth, I am as much one as I am the other. But I have never been afforded the privilege of being considered a white person. It's just somebody sees me and I'm a black person, right? And I'm not trying to contest that. It's just, it speaks so much to what you said about how shallow the root of the issue is, in the sense that it really is skin deep. Obviously, the roots of this history are deep, but this is a skin deep issue. This isn't an ethnic issue. This isn't a biological issue. These are perceptions and categorization that has been put on a group of people that look a certain way. So whether or not they even identify with that personally seems to cease mattering against the wall of society and opinion and expectations and stereotypes. And to answer your question, though, I just think that was an important, and you can, I think that's just like an important preface from my worldview, like, but what that means for me, like when I see a man being murdered, and I hear all these stories of men being injured, like, that in and of itself, it is horrendous and awful and evil, but it doesn't emotionally scare me. I know there are a lot of people that it does, and that's just a temperament thing, right? I am not easily scared by individual circumstances. I'm like, okay, there are a couple of evil people doing bad things, whatever. I know there's greater issues, but I'm inclined to want to say most people probably don't think that way or would never do something like that. So that's a horrific thing, and honestly, I think that just by our personalities, that kind of thing probably deeply scares and adds fear to my wife's heart more than it does me. But that's a temperament thing. Not everybody's wired that way. Other people might be more fearful. But I will tell you what does actually strike fear in my heart is when my presumptions about what's happening generally are challenged. So for instance, Ahmud, right? Aubrey, a few, like not very long ago at all, we heard about this, was going about his business more or less, and unarmed man hunted down by two white men who thought he was suspicious and he wasn't complying with these non-police officers who had guns, and they killed him, murdered him. That was horrible. That's awful. That's scary. And that sure can make me nervous to go out jogging. But I'll tell you what scared me even more. You know, there was the big catchphrase out at the time, justice for Ahmad, right? Which is, yes, amen. And it was disturbing that it had taken so long for legal action to be taken against these men. But what I'm driving towards is the part that scared me. Shortly after that started trending, I saw a Facebook page saying justice for, and I don't remember their names and I don't really care to know their names, but justice for the two men who had killed him, saying they were just good Christian men defending their neighborhood. And that existing in and of itself is like, okay, bad. But then I saw the 40,000 members of the group. And I thought, how can there be 40,000 people in the world who are willing to be so callous in the face of obvious evil, of an obviously evil act? Those men, we're all fallen humans, but what they did was certainly evil. And that strikes fear in my heart, because that breaks my desire. That I have this desire to believe that the world is mostly good, that most people are good, that most people are well-intentioned or thoughtful. And when I see something like that, I get scared of the ignorance. I get scared of the implications. I get scared of the fact that there are people that believe it's justified to do something like that. And then the fear starts to creep into my heart that, man, maybe this really could happen to me. Because there are tens of thousands of people that are willing to even out loud say that they support that. How many more are being silent or just aren't on Facebook? How many other groups like this exist? That genuinely, just at an emotional level, strikes fear into my heart.
For those who don't know, Ahmaud Arbery was very recent, but he went into a home that was being newly constructed and went and kind of walked around inside the house, which I shared in first service that I've done before. I've gone up to the third floor to see the Mount Hood view and all of that, and came back down and went on my way. And he had gone into a new home construction and then came out and began to get chased down by two trucks and two men in one truck with a shotgun. They have video footage of all of that, and they're being prosecuted from what I understand in all of that. But the the way that the picture was being painted, I think, just creates these bigger and bigger walls and dividing lines. And it's unfortunate because oftentimes you have people who fall on these two sides of the lines, and they end up falling into a line that is associated with and forgive me, but a political party and a race, and these lines that get further and further and further and further and further. And I believe that the Lord wants us to follow him around these walls of Jericho that are really, really hard to explore and really, really hard to share and really, really difficult to go there, but to be willing to see someone who's hurting in someone else's reality. And guess what? I have a testimony too. I have a story too. I have a very life that has had all kinds of different sorts of challenges and things associated with it, and things that, but I'm not going to sit in the position of saying, well, so what? You're having a tough time. I had a tough time too, and keep on walking by. We're not going to be like the priest. We're not going to be like the Levite. We're going to be like the Good Samaritan, because Jesus tells us to be like the Good Samaritan. And there are people out there, I think, on either side, frankly, and I want to speak to that as well, because I think that there are people on either side right now that if you disagree with someone, let's say someone's disagreeing with what's going on either side of this, and you're leaving them for dead, and you're saying, well, I'm not going to be your friend, and I'm not going to talk to you anymore because you disagree that way, and so I'm going to turn a deaf ear, and the line gets wider and wider and wider and wider and wider. Rather than saying, let's put Christ at the center, and Jesus doesn't give us the option to leave anyone behind because he didn't leave anyone behind. He loved us so much that he laid down his life for us. And so we're willing to lay down our life, and I'm willing to lay down my life for the one that I don't understand or the one that I don't agree with, and I'm willing to say, you know what, let's talk about this. And I think people need to start having feelings about this, and facts about it, and friendships. And if at the end of that we disagree, then guess what? We're still called to love. We're still called to love one another. We owe that to one another. But when someone's getting hate perpetuated on them, or this greater reality, and the reason why I'm wanting you to share in this way is because I think that there are a lot of people who don't understand. Like when a phrase comes out that says, Black Lives Matter. And that's a hot one, right?
Mm.
There are people who are saying, no, all lives matter. And then you have other people who are saying, Black Lives Matter. Why can't you just say that? Well, I'm going to just tell you right now, I have no problem with that. I have no problem. Black Lives Matter. Yes, they do. And now they're having things come out that say, Black Lives Matter. We know all lives matter. Right? But what they're looking for is an acknowledgement. It's like this. If we went down into a neighborhood and there was a house on fire, and we're talking about the different things in recent history, we just talked about or two of them, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. And so that's in recent history. And then there's, this police brutality. Like if we walk into a neighborhood and there's a house on fire, and we look at that house and someone goes, well, we better call the fire department to put this fire out. And someone goes, well, what about all the other houses? Well, no, not all the other houses are on fire. And so we get to acknowledge what's going on and share in our heart to say, you know what? Our brothers and sisters, they're feeling like they're on the side of the road being left for dead. And then say, with the heart that Jesus has given me to love my brother as myself, love my neighbor as myself, to go to that one and say, hey, I'm not worried about the backstory. I'm not worried about what was. I'm not worried about what got a person in that particular situation. We talked about how they dig up things about different things. But to be willing for us as Christians to reach beyond that and say, I'm going to help. I'm going to be a part of that because I love you. And this matters. This work that you and I are doing in just even the kingdom of God, we have a great desire for people from all races and backgrounds and generations, statuses to be able to come and be welcomed into. But I think that this is so healing and powerful for us to be able to share openly and in a balanced way to put Christ at the center of this, that there's wrong in the world, but we know the right in the world, and you have that. Like, you have that heart of putting Christ at the center. And I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it goes into that other term that we talked about, which people are putting out there, white privilege. It's a hashtag, and I'm just being honest. Like when I first saw that, I'm going, is that racially charged towards me, or are people hating white people now, or are people doing this? And I don't know about that term. And then I start looking into it, and I start opening my eyes to another person's reality and the fact that I've never been pulled over 18 times in my life. I don't even think I've been pulled over 5 times in my life. I've never been told certain things. I don't have to think about the fact that in my neighborhood, I'm the majority. And when someone else moves into a neighborhood and they're of a different race, and particularly because of the conversation that we're having right now, like black person moves into the neighborhood, you know exactly where that person lives. Why? Because there's fewer. And that's a different reality. And so we have to have compassion, and we have to understand that there's a people who are saying what they're saying to us is that they're hurting. And so we see protests, peaceful protests, and maybe people don't understand why people are having peaceful protests or going out and saying this. And this is because they feel as though their voice has not been heard. And so we have the opportunity to hear and to listen. Do you want to speak to any of that?
I could speak to any part of it. Do you have a...
I don't know. We're just trusting the Lord here.
Yeah, that's all we can do. There's so much in there. I don't know. Where should we start?
Okay, here's where I want to go. Do you agree with these things I said?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make... anything you disagree with, like, this is the opportunity, for us to talk through that or to flesh things out. And I think that this is that opportunity really for us to love our neighbor as ourselves. So go ahead.
Okay, here's maybe a thread in there that not that I disagree with you on it, I agree with you, but maybe I can say it in some of my terms and just from the way I've had to approach this, right? So terms like Black Lives Matter and white privilege, I watched as many of my friends and people I knew, recoiled at the sound of those things and took them very deeply personally, but not necessarily taking them to heart, but took them as an offense. And when I first recognized that, I didn't fully understand why it was so particularly challenging. Like, I guess we'll just take like Black Lives Matter as a case study, right? When that phrase came out, Black Lives Matter, the meaning and depth of that idea was instantaneously obvious to me in my experiences. Black Lives Matter. Yeah, thank you. And then I saw the rebuttal, all lives matter. Don't say Black Lives Matter. There was this, and it showed me that there was an offense being taken at the phrase Black Lives Matter, and there seemed to be this correction that people felt was needed to remind us that all lives are actually the ones that matter, not just any one group. And so the thing is, I really do believe this is a common experience for many people of color. When they saw the rebuttal, all lives matter, it felt extremely dismissive. It felt like a way of squirming out of the tension of the issue. It felt like they just didn't want to recognize that there really was racial injustice. And that was honestly very painful to see all lives matter being plastered everywhere, because it felt so dismissive. And like I expressed earlier, it's already really scary for many of us to share some of those experiences and to say that there's a problem. And so I didn't understand it. But as I've had more conversations and talked with more people, not just even in the past few weeks, but over the course of time, and like just heard people talk and tried to listen and try to understand, I think I came to understand how a lot of really well-meaning, kind, and considerate people would be so quick to say something like all lives matter. When I heard Black Lives Matter, I instantly had a part of my life tugged on. That tapestry of experience that I got tugged on, and the times where I felt like I wasn't being seen, where my life didn't matter, all the times I'd seen people of color's lives being thrown away or disrespected. I think about the quick judgment calls that are made when a 14-year-old boy pulls out his cell phone when cops are around and they shoot him because they think he is a suspect, even though he's completely unarmed. And while that's a judgment call that was made in a second, and I'm not saying that cop was racist, I think there might have been more fear in that cop's heart. I think they might have been more ready to act. And I want those processes to slow down, right? But that's that's a tangent I could go on. But I get all of these things that stir up in my heart that remind me of the times when, that boy getting shot didn't necessarily see justice right away, if at all, when so many people were killed by cops or others. Because it's not, for me, if that's a question, we'll get to it. But seen so many tragedies that felt like they weren't addressed or they were treated with less of a serious. I gotta go into it. Is that okay? People think, and I know this is total parentheses. I'll get back to my other idea maybe if I remember to. I think some people are mad at the police or all police or whatever, because there's always individuals. I'm a big believer that individuals are responsible for themselves. And so I can't say that every single person out there who's protesting or rioting or whatever has the perfect motive or perfect heart. But when I look at the problem, and I really believe that when many other thoughtful people look at the problem, they're not saying, oh, I hate all police officers, they're all evil people. The problem is not about individual police officers. It's not even really about the police. I genuinely think that most people who are cops are doing that because they want to support their family and make an income doing something that helps the community. And I think a lot of other thoughtful people of all classes and creeds would agree with that, even those who are upset and hurt right now. The issues isn't with individuals. The issue is that there are outliers. The issue is that there are bad actors who make really poor judgment calls and it costs people lives, who make really malicious judgment calls and sit on people's necks, kneel on people's necks. There are individuals that are within that system that are not always being held to account, that are just being sent on administrative leave, which is just vacation with a hand slap. I mean, that's an oversimplification, right? But you understand. We see these people getting killed because of either mistakes, poor judgment calls, over-aggression, and there seems to be very little accountability. And it seems to keep happening and popping up in more and more neighborhoods and people's experiences. And eventually, too many people have had stories that are too close. That is the issue. There's a systemic issue in the way that those things are handled, whether it be an officer or two men protecting their neighborhood. And you can do the research on those things yourself or have those conversations. We don't have time now. And it wouldn't be the right source. But that's a back-end issue, and there's a front-end issue, which is the way that those immediate perceptions might affect a police officer's judgment or any person's judgment. There might be more fear because they see a black man. There might be more fear, and all it takes is a second for someone's life to be over. Right? Guns are powerful things. It's a big responsibility. And I know police officers need them. And I know police officers need the ability to use force to be safe and protect others. But man, if we could just slow it down, if there could just be enough understanding, enough humanization of other individuals in our society, that just slows down for a second longer, countless lives would have been saved. And so for me, that stuff all gets dredged up. And it's really easy to feel like Black lives are not being valued in the same way. And so I think for me and many, many, many other people, when they heard Black Lives Matter, they heard Black Lives Matter too. Let's try and get them up to speed. Let's try and value them equally. But what I learned, so that was so obvious to me. And I didn't understand how that wasn't seen until I had more and more conversations. Largely this week, this part came to me, where people genuinely, well-meaning people, well-intentioned, compassionate, deep-conscious people who love God and I knew loved me, expressed to me the world that they lived in and how the things that I experienced were just unrecognized. They hadn't seen it. They hadn't had to contend with it. And it showed me a little bit of why they might say all lives matter. And here's why I think a lot of people may. Because they for their reality, since they really didn't have these experiences that I had, they believed that they lived in a world where all lives were being valued pretty much equally. And so any assertion of an individual race sounded like it was being asserted above, rather than trying to make up the difference. And so on hearing that, it's like, wow, okay, that was just a break in their understanding of reality. They hadn't reconciled these experiences yet. And it really, that rang so true when I saw the way those people responded. When I saw friends that I knew were well-intentioned that explained to me how they had been so hesitant to accept that there was an issue of race, that when they would hear a news story, their first thought was like, well, what's the rest of the story? Obviously, that man did something to deserve it, or probably, And their first instinct, just instinctually, was to dismiss it as an issue. That's not every single human being, but a lot of my friends shared that with me. People that I would have thought had considered these things, because I knew them to be compassionate, gentle people. But their first instinct was to dismiss and not to accept. And I believe that's because they were deeply conscientious, kind people, but they hadn't had those experiences. And as soon as they recognize a problem, they were going to have to latch onto it and fight for it and stand up for it. But it's a lot easier to ignore the problem than it is to take on a new burden. And so I think just psychologically, it was much simpler in their automatic process to dismiss it.
Well, and I think for many people, the easiest thing right now would be to try to come to some sense of normalcy. There's a disruption going on in our world. We're being stretched. We've all been quarantined for 3 months, and now we're adding on something. We're going, okay, now I'm faced with this, and now I have to wrestle with this, and now I have to have a shake-up to my makeup. But the Lord wants to break it all up because he calls us to be one. And I just think that instead of being so quick to saying, oh, well, what's the backstory on that? Or, oh, I didn't get the whole video of that. If there was a video of someone putting a knee on a dog's neck for 9 minutes and the dog passed away, would we ask what the dog did before that? Or would we put that person in prison? And I'm not trying to be... I'm just saying that there's reality. And the reality is that no one's going around saying black supremacy, but white supremacy was real. And what they're trying to say is like, hey, acknowledge, and we need to acknowledge, and we need to love our neighbors as ourselves. And there's anger on one side, and there's apathy on the other side. And there's extremes, right? Maybe there are people who want still those things, black or white supremacy, but the overwhelming majority is just basically saying, hey, this isn't right. And so as Christians, we have the opportunity to stand and say, hey, this isn't right. And to do our part and to help. And I think people are so fearful about, oh, well, if we do this, then this means this, and this means this, and this means that, instead of just doing the right thing. Like, what's the right thing to do? And so you have anger and you have pain, and we need empathy, or we need compassion to understand that, but we don't need apathy or indifference. We can't be indifferent about people's lives getting taken from them. And no one is saying, Casey, I think you're saying, like, obviously we have these issues at hand, right? We have racism, we have police brutality, we have protests, peaceful protests, and then we have people who are, Antifa getting hired out and going down and bashing out windows and burning down buildings and things of that. And that's this other side of anger. But we can't be apathetic. We have to be like the Good Samaritan and go and find that one and put them up and take them in. And I'm telling you this right now, church, if Casey is my brother, same mom, by blood, and he and I are working these issues out in our conversations, and we grew up essentially in the same household, and frankly, like between our family and our immediate family, like I would say our family is probably predominantly black or half biracial. I mean, right?
So it's a good mix.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about in our immediate, brothers and sisters. We have Hispanic.
Yeah.
Like, and we're working this stuff out even amongst our family. We have to understand that Christ calls us to be one in him. Christ is all and Christ is in all. And so I believe that what we're doing today through first and second service is just scratching the surface on conversations that can take place so that we can understand another person and then respond with compassion. And you're accountable for you. And I'm accountable for me. And people are accountable for the way that they walk this out. But what I don't want to do as pastor, and I know you don't as a pastor in this church, is to have a church where we just go, oh, let's just move on, No, that's why we wanted to take that moment and pause today.
Yeah.
But Casey, can you talk to that? And,
Yes.
and just those elements of these sides and how we can really come together in Christ. And, we'll just, I guess, do that in closing, and hopefully we can have more conversations as we go.
Yeah. So, and thanks for asking that, because this is where I want to go. This is where I want to live in a space of what do we do? Because there's so many problems in the world. Every life is riddled with, it seems back to back. I want to say carnage, but I don't want to be too harsh. Just life's full of challenges. One thing I'll say as I just go into speaking to what I really believe settles deep in my heart is for anybody that might be feeling, man, I didn't want to get political at church, or, what agenda, blah, 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 blah. Sorry, I want you and I want everybody to know that this has been a really scary and open conversation for me and for us. I know for my brother as well. And I'm sure for many of us, this isn't easy. And I wouldn't describe the feelings I was having before this service as excited. Samuel and I both felt the stirring halfway through, or some part way through first service, that maybe he and I just needed to come up and talk before our church. And I kind of just dismissed the thought when it came into my mind, because I was scared of it. And then Samuel came over to me and said, hey, I think we should do this. And of course, that was a confirmation. So what could I say besides, because I want to be surrendered to the Lord, and I understood why it could be important. But I was fighting back tears all the way up until I got up to lead worship, out of fear, because this stuff is close to my heart, and the things that I bring up, and if I seem impassioned or I went in a way that you weren't expecting or wanting, or if you were, or whatever you're experiencing, just know I felt a need to open up part of myself. And it's a very uncomfortable space for me. So thank you for grace as we navigate it together. Thank you for knowing this isn't a perfect conversation. And for all those who are hearing and listening, thank you so much for hearing me. Martin Luther King said that he had a dream that one day his kids wouldn't be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that dream still lives. I want to be seen for all the things that I really am first. But I live in a world, we all live in a world where people see our appearances first. And my hope and prayer is that people will not make assumptions about my character based on the experiences that they could assume from how I look or dress or any other way. That that who I really am would be something they would have to discover, and they couldn't just decide. So I think that a really important way forward for us as a church, as a people, is going to be so different than one side or the other. Man, sides need to be so irrelevant to us. Unity is our call and our cause. Unity is the purpose. We're the body of Christ. We're meant to be unified. And when we do that, The Bible says that it shows the world that he sent Jesus, that we're his, and that we're loved. It demonstrates the love of God when we as a body are unified. And that's where we need to drive towards. And so just for the sake of hemming these things in to speak to either side, there's the side of, these extremes of anger. People who are angry right now, and it's coming out in maybe some unhealthy or unrighteous expressions. The Bible says, be angry and do not sin. And we need to hold to that. But there is a lot to be angry about right now. A lot of people are angry for a reason, whether or not it's me or you or someone else. I want to understand, I do understand why some people are angry and why they might think they need to turn to violence in that anger. Because, violence has gotten things done in the world before. Throughout the course of the history of the world, violence has been a very effective tool for change. It's how our country started, a revolution. Even when Jesus came, that's what they wanted, was a war leader, drive out the Romans, right? But Jesus subverted that, and he set the stage for us to do the same. And so for those of us who are struggling with anger, choose something different than sin. Don't let your anger, don't let your hurt seduce you into doing things that aren't of the Lord. Don't let it draw you into sin. Don't let their wrong sully you. So I do want to speak to that because that's truth. I think that we need to be protesting. We need to make our voices heard. We need to be Christians before anything else, if that's who we are. If we're children of God, that's our deepest identity. And we have a calling in that. So that's one thing. But that leads me directly into what I see as the other rock, the other issue, apathy. We really need to fight the temptation to sin in our anger, but I also believe we need to fight being coddled in our apathy, allowing ourselves to sit in a world as we are comfortable and ignore issues that drag something else out of us. I'm understanding more and more that apathy isn't necessarily malicious, it's just uninformed. And when people start to understand, when they can't refute any longer, that those who are apathetic often become champions of justice and righteousness and compassion. Because if there's anything that I think we all need, every single person, especially every single child of God, every single Christian, every single member of that family, is compassion, love for one another, gentleness and humility to actually hear. And it really is for all of us. I cannot tell you how much I have learned and come to understand in these conversations. How much my perspective has expanded and shifted, and how much easier it is for me to be compassionate, even for people that I think are slighting me. I've grown in that. And I think it's something that we're all called to grow in this season. And I know it's hard to be constantly confronted with it right now, but I'm so grateful for the work the Lord is doing through it. I am elated at the goodness of our God, that he takes the broken and despicable things of the world, the sins and shortcomings, and he uses them to bind us together as the body, to draw us near, because that's who we should be. We should be the champions, the first ones to be unified.
Amen.
And the whole world should look and see that unity in the midst of this chaos and think, what's going on there?
Amen.
What is binding them together? And then we need to have the courage to point them towards the one who is binding us together, despite whatever our predisposition was. That Christ changes us, that he transforms us. And he says, stop getting caught up in the struggles of this world. It's not where your battles lie, in flesh and blood, in skin and race. We have a higher calling. I know that to be true. And I believe that calling calls us to compassion and to love and to be true representatives of Christ to one another and to the world.
Well, thank you, Casey. I love you so much. And if we're going to win this city, We have to win it the way Christ won it.
Mm.
And if you're angry right now and you're hurt right now, remember what Jesus did in his hurt. We have to invite people in to the conversation. And there are people who might hurt you. There are people who might be saying hurtful things. There are people who might be doing hurtful things. But the moment that we shun them or say, I'm done with you, we turn our backs on Christ's heart, because Christ never said, I'm done with you. Even while we were yet sinners, he laid down his life for us. He died for us. And I just want to read here Philippians 2, verse 3 to 7, or 8 or 9. Do nothing from selfish or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourself, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, though he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking on the form of a bondservant, being made in the likeness of men, being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled himself, even to the point of death on a cross. I'm asking you to come to the center. And I'm asking you to put Jesus at the center. If you're apathetic, I'm asking you to regard others as more important. If you're angry, I'm asking you to come to the center and regard Jesus as more important. Christian, Casey spoke to it, we have a big battle. We have a bigger battle. We wrestle not against flesh and blood and sin and the enemy. He wants to kill and he wants to steal and he wants to destroy. But Jesus came so that we would have life. And when we stand before him in eternity and we look to him, I do not want him to be grieved over the things that we made most important. Let's make him most important. But when we make him most important, we have compassion. We love our neighbor as ourselves. And there's no way that I can end this conversation, because the conversation just needs to keep going. But I tell you what, I'm brokenhearted. I'm brokenhearted. But I can only imagine how brokenhearted the Lord would be to see his people making something that's skin deep divide them, when he paid the ultimate price so that he could unite us. Let's be united and let's find a way. But the only way that we're going to find a way is if we say, what does the Lord have to say to his servant? And we follow him around these impossible walls. Casey, any final word?
Just that Jesus was compassionate all the way to the cross, even to say to those who were before him, I should say, for the sake of those who were before him, Lord, or rather, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Like, he was able to carry compassion even as he was being killed. So no matter who you are or how annoyed or slighted or hurt you feel, wherever you stand, can we be more? Can we see the example that Christ carried for us, that he walked out for us, even to his own death, even to the cross? He walked in compassion and love. And that's where we pick up our cross and we follow.
Amen. Well, let this be some kind of model or ministry to you in your life. We can do this. Let's keep Christ at the center.
Yes, Lord.
God bless you. We'll see you soon.